Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to delve into a topic that, most people don't think about every day, but it's actually really crucial to how the world works. Semi-trailers.
Yeah,
Those big things you see on the highway all the time.
absolutely. Yeah. The backbone of global logistics and trade, really.
Exactly. And we've got a really interesting report here. It's a 2025 market report looking all the way ahead to 2033. And our mission today is to kind of unpack all the important insights that we can pull out of this report. What does it tell us about this huge global industry and what's in store for the future?
Yeah. And what's fascinating about this report is it really dives deep. It's not just about the big picture. It gets into the different regions of the world, the different types of trailers, the companies that are leading the pack. It's a real treasure trove of information for anyone who wants to understand this critical sector.
So I think it makes sense to just jump right into it, right? Let's start with the big picture. The report estimates that the global semi-trailer market in 2025 is going to be worth, get this, USD 34.82 billion. That's a lot of money.
That's a huge market, and it's only getting bigger,
Yeah.
By 2033, they're projecting that it's going to reach USD 50.67 billion.
Wow, that's a CAGR of 4.80%.
Yeah.
For those of you keeping track. So it's definitely a growing market, not just staying stable.
Absolutely. And one of the key drivers behind this growth, as the report points out, is the expansion of manufacturing and industrial sectors around the world.
Right, right. More factories means more stuff to move around.
Exactly. And semi-trailers are essential for moving all that stuff, the raw materials, the finished products, you name it.
So let's zoom in a little bit. Let's take a look at North America, which, according to the report,
Yeah.
is the current leader in the semi-trailer market.
Yeah, North America's really dominating right now. In 2025, they accounted for over 40% of the global revenue. That's a pretty big chunk.
Yeah, their market size was USD 12.88 billion. That's not small potatoes.
No, not at all. And their projected CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is 3.3%, so they're still expected to see significant growth. It'll bring their market size up to USD 16.72 billion by 2033.
So still a healthy growth rate, even if it's not as high as the global average.
Exactly. But, it's interesting to see how that North American market breaks down, by country.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us more.
So the U.S. obviously is the big player there. Their 2025 market size is USD 10.17 billion, with a projected CAGR of 3.1%.
Yeah, the U.S. is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. What about Canada and Mexico?
Well, Canada's actually doing pretty well. Their market size in 2025 was USD 1.55 billion, but their CAGR is a little bit higher at 4.1%.
Oh, interesting.
And then Mexico is also seeing decent growth. Their market size was USD 1.17 billion in 2025, with a CAGR of 3.8%.
So Canada and Mexico are kind of punching above their weight a little bit.
Yeah, you could say that.
What do you think is driving North America's dominance in this market?
Well, I think there are a few factors at play here. The report really emphasizes the importance of North America's well-established supply chain network.
Right.
They've got this incredible infrastructure of highways and logistics hubs, that have been built up over decades.
Yeah.
And then you've got the rise of e-commerce, which has just exploded in recent years.
Oh, absolutely.
That's created this massive demand for freight movement, especially for getting goods that last mile to consumers.
Right.
And North America is also a major hub for intermodal transportation.
Okay, intermodal, that's when you move like a trailer from a truck to a train to a ship, right?
Exactly. And that requires special trailers that are designed to be compatible with all those different modes of transportation.
Right.
So those are some of the key factors that I think are driving North America's leadership in this market.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's hop across the pond and take a look at Europe, which is also a big player in this market.
Yeah, Europe's a major force. In 2025, they accounted for over 30% of the global revenue.
Wow, so they're not far behind North America.
No, they're not. Their market size in 2025 was USD 10.1 billion.
And their projected CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is 3.9%. So again, a solid growth rate, even if it's not as high as the global average.
Right.
So what about individual countries in Europe? What's the breakdown there?
Well, the UK is a big market, obviously. Their 2025 market size was USD 1.70 billion, and their CAGR is actually quite impressive at 4.7%.
Oh, wow. So they're doing pretty well.
They are, and the report specifically mentions, Brexit and the changes in the supply chain there as a factor driving that growth.
Makes sense. Businesses have had to adapt.
Absolutely. And then you've got France with a 2025 market size of USD 929 million and a CAGR of 3.1%.
Okay.
And Germany is the leader in Europe with a market size of USD 2.0 billion in 2025 and a healthy CAGR of 4.1%.
Yeah, Germany's got a really strong manufacturing sector, so that makes sense.
Absolutely.
What about some of the other, European countries?
Well, Italy's got a market size of USD 868 million with a CAGR of 3.3%.
Okay.
And Russia, despite, all the geopolitical stuff going on, is still a significant market with a size of USD 1.57 billion in 2025 and a slightly lower CAGR of 2.9%.
It's still a market to watch.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Spain comes in at USD 828 million
Right.
with a 3.0% CGR.
Okay.
And then you've got some of the Nordic countries, which are seeing really nice growth. Sweden, for example, had a market size of USD 313 million in 2025 with a CAGR of 4.0%.
That's really good.
And Denmark's at USD 212 million with a CAGR of 3.7%.
Right.
Even the smaller markets like Switzerland and Luxembourg are seeing healthy growth. Switzerland's at USD 151 million with a 3.5% CAGR.
Okay. And Luxembourg's at USD 121 million with a really impressive KGR of 4.2%.
Wow, that's really good for such a small country.
It is. And the rest of Europe collectively accounts for USD 1.41 billion with a KGR of 2.6%.
So it's a really diverse picture across the European continent with different countries, growing at different rates and different factors driving that growth.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how things vary from country to country.
Absolutely. So what do you think is driving Europe's, overall strong position in this market and their continued growth?
Well, the report points to the increasing demand for efficient transportation of goods across Europe, both perishable and non-perishable goods.
Right.
And this is particularly important in the food and beverage industry
Right.
because they need, refrigerated trailers to transport all those perishable goods.
Right.
And the EU has really strict food safety regulations,
Yeah. So that's also driving demand for specialized trailers that can meet those regulations.
Yeah.
And then you've got, the growth of online grocery shopping,
Right.
which is also contributing to the need for refrigerated transport.
Yeah, it's all about getting those groceries to people's doorsteps, fresh and safe.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about North America, we've talked about Europe. Now let's talk about APAC, which is, according to the report, the fastest growing region in the semi-trailer market.
Yeah, APAC is really, really taking off. While they only held about 23% of the global revenue in 2025, their projected CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is a whopping 7.5%.
Wow, that's way higher than the global average.
It is, and that means their market is expected to reach USD 14.87 billion by 2033.
So they're going to be closing the gap with Europe pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. So what countries in APAC are driving this growth?
Well, China is obviously the big player there. Their market size in 2025 was USD 3.51 billion with a strong CAGR of 7.0%.
Yeah, China's economy is just booming.
It is, and that's really driving demand for semi-trailers, to move all those goods around.
Makes sense. What about other countries in APAC?
Well, Japan is another big market. Their 2025 market size was USD 1.15 billion with a KGR of 6.0%.
Okay.
And South Korea is also doing well with a market size of USD 1.00 billion in 2025 and a KGR of 6.6%.
Okay.
But the real standout in terms of growth rate is India.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their market size in 2025 was USD 836 million, but their projected CAGR is a remarkable 9.4%.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, and the report attributes this to the increasing need for last-mile delivery in India's, rapidly growing urban centers.
Yeah, and India's cities are just exploding in population, so that makes sense.
Exactly, and you need specialized trailers, often smaller trailers, to navigate those dense urban environments.
Right.
So that's a big factor in India's growth.
Okay, so what about some of the other APAC countries?
Well, Australia has a market size of USD 435 million with a KGR of 6.8%.
Okay.
Singapore is a small market, but they're seeing really high growth. Their market size in 2025 was USD 167 million with a KGR of 7.8%.
Wow.
Taiwan is at USD 326 million with a 7.3% CGR,
Okay.
and the collective Southeast Asia market is at USD 552 million with an impressive KGR of 8.3%.
So strong growth across the board in Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. And the rest of the APAC region accounts for USD 376 million with a solid KGR of 7.3%.
So APAC is really the region to watch in this semi-trailer market.
I think so.
What do you think is driving this rapid expansion in APAC?
Well, I think there are a few factors at play here. Rapid urbanization is a major one.
Right.
You know, as more people move to cities across the region, the need for efficient transportation of goods within those cities just increases dramatically.
Right.
And then you've got, infrastructure expansion. A lot of countries in APAC are making, massive investments in roads and highways and logistics networks.
Right.
And that's creating more opportunities for semi-trailers to move goods around.
Makes sense.
And then finally, you've got increasing industrial activity,
Right.
Across various sectors in APAC. And that's driving up demand for trailers, particularly trailers that are used in heavy industry and construction.
Yeah. Yeah. You need those big trailers to move all the heavy equipment and materials.
Exactly.
So we've talked about North America, Europe, and APAC. What about some of the other regions of the world?
Well, the report also provides some data on South America, the Middle East, and Africa.
Okay.
So South America holds over 5% of the global market share in 2025. Their market size was USD 1.32 billion,
Okay.
and they're projected to grow at a CGR of 5.5% to reach USD 2.03 billion by 2033.
So solid growth in South America as well.
Yeah. Yes. And Brazil is the largest market there with a market size of USD 566 million in 2025 and a CGR of 6.1%.
Okay.
And the report links that growth to Brazil's expanding agricultural sector.
Makes sense.
Argentina is also doing well with a market size of USD 222 million in 2025
Yeah.
and a KGR of 6.4%.
Okay.
And that's attributed to increased agricultural exports from Argentina.
So agriculture seems to be a big driver of semi-trailer demand in South America.
It is, yeah. But the report also points to the potential for growth coming from e-commerce and the retail sector in South America.
Mm-hmm.
Like as online shopping becomes more popular, there's going to be a greater need for distribution networks and transportation, including semi-trailers, to move all those goods around.
Makes sense. So what about the Middle East?
Well, the Middle East is a smaller market, around 2% of the global market share in 2025, with a size of USD 1.39 billion.
Right.
But they're projected to grow at a pretty healthy CGR of 6.1% to reach USD 2.23 billion by 2033. So still a market with potential.
Definitely. And Saudi Arabia is the key market there.
Right.
With a 2025 market size of USD 490 million and a COGR of 6.4%.
Okay.
And the UAE is another important market with a market size of USD 287 million in 2025 and a CAGR of 6.6%.
Okay.
And the report links this growth in the Middle East to the expanding healthcare infrastructure there and the increasing trade of medical goods.
Right.
So there's a specific demand for trailers, often temperature-controlled trailers, to transport all those pharmaceuticals and medical equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So finally, let's talk about Africa.
Okay, so Africa currently accounts for about 1% of the global market share in 2025. Their market size was USD 766 million.
Okay.
And they're projected to grow at a CAGR of 5.1% to reach USD 1.14 billion by 2033.
Okay, so steady growth, but not as explosive as some of the other regions.
Right.
What's driving the growth in Africa? Well, the report points to increasing urbanization and the development of supply chains across the continent as significant drivers.
Right.
And there's also a growing need for semi-trailers to help distribute agricultural products, to get food from farms to markets.
Makes sense.
So those are some of the key factors that are driving growth in Africa.
Okay, so we've covered the global landscape. We've talked about the different regions. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the different types of semi-trailers that are out there.
Okay.
What are the main categories that the report identifies?
Well, the report segments the market by trailer type,
Right.
and right now, dry vans are the dominant category.
Okay, dry vans, those are the classic, like, enclosed box trailers that you see on the highway all the time, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And they're dominant because they're so versatile. They can transport a huge variety of non-perishable goods, everything from consumer products to electronics to textiles to retail items.
Right.
They're really the workhorse of the logistics sector. They're
Yeah.
suitable for long-haul transport, for intermodal transport,
Right.
and they're very cost effective.
Okay, so versatile and cost effective, that's a winning combination.
It is, yeah.
What about other types of trailers?
Well, the report also highlights flatbed trailers as the fastest growing segment.
Okay, flatbed trailers, those are the ones that are open, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their growth is being driven by, the need to transport large, heavy cargo that doesn't need to be enclosed. Things like construction equipment, steel, machinery, building supplies.
Right.
And the open design of a flatbed trailer makes it easy to load and unload from different angles, which is really important for those kinds of goods.
Yeah, that makes sense. So dry vans are the workhorse, but flatbeds are really gaining momentum.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the report also looks at the market segmentation based on the weight capacity of trailers, the tonnage segment.
Right.
What are the main categories there?
Well, the below 25 tons segment is the largest right now.
Okay.
And that's being driven by, the demand for urban and regional transport of lighter goods,
Right.
things like consumer items, food, electronics, retail goods.
Right.
And these lighter trailers are really well suited for last mile delivery,
Right.
where you need to be able to maneuver in tight spaces and get into smaller roads.
Right.
And they also tend to be more fuel efficient, which is obviously a big plus.
Yeah.
So that's the below 25 tons segment.
Okay, so that's the one that's really being driven by e-commerce and the need for quick and efficient local delivery.
Absolutely.
What about the heavier trailers?
Well, the between 25-50 tons segment is also seeing a lot of growth.
Okay.
And that's because there's a continuing need for medium to heavy duty transport, across a variety of sectors, including manufacturing, construction, automotive, logistics.
Right.
And these trailers are kind of the sweet spot,
Yeah.
They've got enough carrying capacity to handle, a decent amount of weight, but they're still maneuverable enough to be used in a variety of situations.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So they're popular for both long distance and intermodal transport.
Okay, so you need that kind of in between category to handle all those different needs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the report also analyzes the market based on the number of axles that semi-trailers have.
Right.
What are the main categories there?
Well, the 3 to 4 axle segment is the largest right now.
Okay.
And those trailers are really good at carrying heavier loads while still maintaining stability,
Right?
on
Yep.
the road.
Right. Yeah.
And they also comply with various traffic regulations.
Right.
So they're really well suited for transporting heavy, bulky items in industrial applications and for long distance hauling.
Okay, so that's the current dominant configuration.
Yeah.
What about growth trends in terms of axle count?
Well, the more than 4 axles category is the fastest growing sector.
Okay, more than 4 axles. That's getting into some serious hauling capacity.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. And that growth is being driven by, the need to transport really large, oversized freight over long distances.
Right.
And you see this a lot in industries like mining, oil and gas, and major construction projects.
Yeah, you need those extra axles to distribute the weight and make sure the trailer is stable.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to see how the design of the trailers is so closely tied to the needs of the industries that are using them.
Yeah, it's all about finding the right tool for the job.
Absolutely. So speaking of industries, let's talk about the end use industries that are driving demand for semi-trailers.
Okay.
Uh, what are the main categories that the report identifies?
Well, the food and beverage segment is the largest right now.
Okay, food and beverage, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We all got to eat.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and this is primarily due to the need for refrigerated trailers to transport perishable goods, to
Right,
keep them fresh and safe.
right.
And the growth of e-commerce in the grocery sector is also driving demand for refrigerated
Yeah,
trailers.
it's all about getting those fresh groceries delivered right to people's homes.
Exactly.
So, what about other sectors? What's the fastest growing sector in terms of its need for semi-trailers?
Well, the heavy industry sector is the one that's really taking off.
Okay, heavy industry, that's things like mining, construction, manufacturing. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this growth is being driven by, the ongoing need to move large, heavy machinery, equipment,
Hmm.
raw materials, for all those different projects.
Right.
And this sector relies heavily on specialized trailers like flatbeds and lowboys, which are designed to handle, really heavy loads.
Right. Right.
So as those industries continue to grow, the demand for those types of trailers is just going to keep increasing.
Yeah, so infrastructure development and the expansion of manufacturing around the world are really driving that demand from heavy industry.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the different types of trailers, the different industries that are using them.
Yeah.
Let's step back and take a look at the overall market dynamics.
Okay.
What are the key drivers, the challenges, the trends that are shaping the semi-trailer industry?
Well, the report identifies a few key drivers. The booming logistics and e-commerce industries are obviously major contributors. They're just generating more and more freight that needs to be transported.
Right.
And then you've got the expansion of the cold chain industry,
Right.
which is driven by the demand for temperature sensitive goods like pharmaceuticals and certain types of food.
Right. Right.
And that's driving demand for specialized refrigerated trailers.
Okay, so those are all positive factors pushing the market forward. What about challenges or restraints on the industry?
Well, the report highlights the high initial investment cost of purchasing semi-trailers
Right.
and the ongoing costs of maintaining them.
Right.
These trailers they're big, they're complex, they require, regular maintenance and repairs.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be a barrier for some operators.
Right.
And then there's the volatility in raw material prices.
Right.
Steel and aluminum are key components in trailer manufacturing.
Right.
And those prices can fluctuate quite a bit, which can impact production costs and ultimately, the prices that customers pay.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So those are some of the economic factors that could potentially slow down the growth of the market.
Right.
What about trends, emerging trends that are shaping the future of the semi-trailer market?
Well, there are a couple of big trends that are really starting to take hold. The first is the increasing adoption of electric and hybrid semi-trailer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So kind of like electric cars, but for trucks.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and this is being driven by, growing environmental awareness, the desire to reduce carbon emissions,
Right.
and also the potential for long-term cost savings on fuel.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And then the second big trend is the growing integration of smart technologies and telematics into trailers.
Okay, telematics, that's like GPS tracking and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this allows, for real-time tracking of the location of the trailer, the condition of the trailer, better monitoring of the cargo,
Right.
and just overall improvements in operational efficiency and safety.
Yeah, so you can really keep tabs on where your trailers are, what
Yeah.
they're carrying, and how they're doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so electrification and smart technology, those are trends that we're seeing across a lot of different sectors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that they're starting to have a big impact on the semi-trailer market as well.
Okay, so finally, let's talk about the competitive landscape.
Okay.
Who are the major players in the global semi-trailer market?
Well, the report says that the market is quite competitive
Right.
with a number of well-established companies, all vying for market share.
Right.
And the leading companies are really focusing on sustainability, on innovation, on integrating new technologies,
Mm.
to try to stay ahead of the game.
Right. Right.
Some of the key players that are mentioned in the report are Schmitz Cargobull, Wabash National, Great Dane, and KRON.
Okay, those are all big names in the trucking industry.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
And these companies are often, they've got global reach, they've got a wide range of product offerings.
Right.
They're often involved in strategic alliances and acquisitions.
Okay, so it's a dynamic market, a lot of competition.
It is, yeah.
Uh, the report also mentioned some recent activities and developments in